It is Ralph Gonsalves. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, my dear friend and comrade, President of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, and all colleagues present here today. I want to thank the government and people of Venezuela for their kind invitation to this 20th anniversary summit of ALBA, and to say how much we appreciate all the arrangements that have been made for us. We have listened to excellent speeches from all the preceding speakers, and I want to adopt everything that everyone has said thus far and to call what has been said my own. I shall therefore try not to repeat too much of what has been said, save and except where it is necessary and desirable to do so, but hopefully to add value to this conversation. I want to wish everyone who is listening a wonderful Christmas. I know this perhaps would be the last time we are seeing each other face to face before Christmas, and what I want for Christmas really is to see the results of this summit implemented. I begin by quoting a very important essay written by the Cuban patriot, anti-imperialist fighter, and guide, national hero of Cuba, Jose Marti, in his famous essay of 1891 entitled Our America. And in it, among other things, Jose Marti discusses the importance of ideas and the manner in which ideas are made flesh, ideas which are shaped into something tangible to improve the lot of human beings. And this is what he said in 1891, which I want to embrace and apply to our current circumstances over 100 years later. He says, these are not times for going to bed in a sleeping cap, but rather like Juan de Castellano's men, with our weapons for a pillow, weapons of the mind, which vanquish all others. Trenches of ideas are worth more than trenches of stone. A cloud of ideas is a thing no armored prow can smash through. A vital idea set ablaze before the world at the right moment can, like the mystic banner of the Last Judgment, stop a fleet of battleships. Hometowns that are still strangers to one another must hurry to become acquainted like men who are about to do battle together. Those who shake their fists at each other like jealous brothers quarreling over a piece of land, or the owner of a small house who envies the man with a better one, must join hands and interlace them until the two hands are one. That is what happened 20 years ago with Fidel and Chavez in bringing together the idea of ALBA. This is a unique and extraordinary organization in its conceptualization, in its evolution, and in its delivery of results, delivery of outcomes beneficial to our people. There are 10 member states of ALBA, approximating roughly to 60 million people. ALBA has 9 countries washed by the Caribbean Sea, and 1, Bolivia, is landlocked. We are overwhelmingly an island or seaboard civilization organization. And we have been joined through the fever of history. It amazes me when people will ask, why is it that you're engaged with Cuba and Latin America and Venezuela? Well, first of all, we are prisoners of geography. We are in the same area. There is geographical closeness, and overwhelmingly, save and except for Bolivia, the Caribbean Sea is ours. These countries have all been shaped in their contemporary manifestations by a history of native genocide, the enslavement of African bodies, indentureship, colonialism, and imperialism. We are together in geography, we are in history. And through the fever of that history, we have all become compromises. But it is not because history has compromised us in our evolution as a Caribbean and Latin American civilization. Does it mean that we are compromising in relation to fundamental principles of life, living, and production? Our Caribbean and Latin American civilizations, and there's oneness and there are differences. But one thing for sure is that metaphorically, we are a veritable symphony. We are the songs of the indigenous people, the Amerindians, the Caribs, some people call them, but the Kalinago, the Garifuna. We are the rhythm of Africa. We are the melody of Europe. We are the chords of Asia. And we are the homegrown lyrics of the Caribbean and Latin America. Of course, through this evolution of our civilization, Latin American and Caribbean civilization, dissonances, like in all symphonies, do occur. But those dissonances are dealt with through the customs and traditions arising from the genius of our people or through our legitimate formal institutions. And as independent nation states, equal in international law, we have decided voluntarily to come together for the betterment of our people. The principles are on paper, and there's a document here before us which reaffirms the principles, purposes, and commitments of ALBA. And they're a good reminder. But more than the declaration of principles and purposes of ALBA, ALBA has grown out from the genius of our peoples. And I want us to reflect on this. There are some people today wish to make America white again. And they speak to the genius of their people. But we, our people, possess a profound genius. Because if we did not have this genius, the manner in which the harshness of history and the exploitation which we have been subjected to, that we have nevertheless built ourselves functioning societies at a reasonable level of human development. We have done so by our own selves, through our own institutions, and we have done so through our own image and likeness. Now, there is a general set of principles relating to democracy. Matters of choice, freedom, accountability, justice. But no one civilization possesses an absolute conception or practice of democracy. For instance, our English-speaking Caribbean have had a quote-unquote tutelage of Westminster democracy. But if the truth be told, the Westminster Whitehall model of the United Kingdom has not crossed the Atlantic very well. And to the extent that we have certain of its forms, it is true that many of its structures are very different, and they're functioning and not precisely the same as in, quote-unquote, the mother country. So that when a country preens itself in our hemisphere as the exemplar of democracy, I remind everyone that in 1951, in my country, all adult persons over the age of 21 could vote, whether you are white, brown, yellow, or black. But in the United States of America, black people could not vote in 1951, at least not overwhelmingly so. That is in my lifetime. I was born in 1946. While we were struggling in our Caribbean for independence in 1962, Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago became independent. But Martin Luther King was demonstrating in Washington in 1963 for the right of basic civil rights, which were promised black people at the time of the Declaration of Independence in the late 18th century in the United States of America. I'm not dumbing down the United States of America. I'm only making the point that different societies have evolved in different ways at different paces and shaped by a different set of circumstances. But all of a sudden, they have become extremely judgmental, and that they possess a manifest destiny to rule. In the year 2000, there was a a presidential election between George Bush, G.W. Bush Jr., and Albert Gore. The state of Florida determined the presidential elections. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court. You may recall, the first time I've heard about these things in all my studies of politics and elections, about hanging chads and pregnant chads. In fact, it appeared as though you had to be a Hebrew prophet to be able to discern who voted for these different chads which were pregnant and those which were hanging. Amazingly, it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. A verdict of 5-4 was returned. But the 5 persons who voted for the Republican George Bush to have won the election, the 5 justices, all 5 of them were nominated by Republican presidents. And the 4 who said that Al Gore was the winner were all nominated for approval by the US Senate by Democratic presidents. Well, no, they had their internal processes. That's their business. I'm not quarreling with them. I'm just only making an observation. Well, how can you now tell me, when the internal authorities in Venezuela made a declaration, that declaration by the electoral authorities was interrogated by the Supreme Court of Venezuela, and you want to tell me that you can stay outside and judge that the process which has taken place in Venezuela is inferior to a process that you have? Who gave you the authority to be an arbiter? And then you tell me that you are possessed of right reason. Your right reason led you in the United States, in Western Europe, to say that a man, not too long ago, who was celebrated as the president of Venezuela, that is to say Juan Guaido, I understand he's probably seeking a job as a taxi man somewhere in Miami or someplace else in the United States. I don't know what is his current position. But, and I wish him well, and I hope he gets his job as a taxi driver or the operator in an elevator in a building in Miami or New York or wherever. It doesn't really matter to me. I mean, that's his own. But they were going around saying that the international community recognized Guaido. 50-odd countries recognize Guaido. But you have 193 countries of the United Nations. How you become the international community when 53 or 55 recognized Guaido, and the rest of them said that the duly elected president was Nicolas Maduro. And more than that, the world has 8 billion people, and 7 billion in the 140 odd who recognize Maduro. And a golden billion somehow is more important than the rest of humanity. We are friends with the United States of America. And in many respects, we are all joined at the hip with the United States of America. It's the most powerful economy the world has ever seen. Even though Cuba has been striking out on its own independence, there's no Moses yet to part the narrow 90-mile waterway between Havana and Miami. So you are conjoined. The television stations show American films. I'm in the hotel, I turn on, I see CNN in the hotel. I see BBC, I see other stations too. There's a linkage in this multilateral world. What reason can there be? Because of the ideological requisites and the interests of monopoly capitalism and presidential politics of South Florida, that you have chosen to say that Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua are national security threats to the United States. It's laughable. And you pass a law and executive order on that. Of course, I have been trained to think that the law is right reason. But occasionally, the law is an ass. I saw a declaration made that Nicaragua, a country of 6 million people, is a national security threat to the United States. It's all the way down in Central America. How could reasonable people make such absurd declarations? Because you don't like what Ortega is doing? That's a matter for the Nicaraguan people, as it is a matter for the Venezuelan people and the Cuban people. Then you proclaim and you tell me that the central contradiction in today's world is between democracy and autocracy. The central contradiction in today's world is who gets what, when, where, and how. That has always been the central contradiction. Who gets the resources in the world? Who determines who to get the resources and how those resources are to be divided? That's where the central contradiction is. You can fool other people, but you certainly can't fool me as a student of history as to where what is the central contradiction? Was it a central contradiction between autocracy and democracy when the United States of America, the deep state, organized in 1973 the overthrow of a democratically elected government in Chile, led by Allende? I think that with President Trump, who is entering the White House in January, I think we need to have an intelligent conversation with him, with his Secretary of State, say, listen, we can live together peacefully as neighbors. We can But we have to do so with respect for each other and without ideological preconditions. I am a person, and ALBA is, and that's why St. Vincent and Grenadines that we are members of ALBA. This is a very special organization, and we have come together in love, in faith, with fresh hope, and in our region as a zone of peace. And I want to repeat those three virtues in addition to peace: love, faith, and hope. And I say fresh hope, because there are new circumstances in the world where we have to have fresh hope in going forward. These are virtues which are found in one of Paul's letters. Paul, servant of the Lord, called to be an apostle. One of his letters in the book of Corinthians, 1 Corinthians. And the United States is a Christian community. Love is a never fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. Love. You know, but one of the things is this. I've lived long enough to know that the declaration of love in general is not that which is the true mark of love. You can always declare, you go on a platform, you say, I love the people. You have to love in the particular. The homeless person, the unemployed person, the woman who is discriminated against because she's a woman, an ethnic minority discriminated against. You have to love in the particular, because it is that love which brings both joy and pain. Because if you do not love in the particular, you do not have any pain. But the joy of loving in the particular is a beautiful human experience. And I say to my American friends that ALBA is about love. It's about complementarity. And faith is embedded in it. The Pauline virtue, which says that faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of that which we have not yet seen. We are hoping for the fulfillment of the proposal of Agro-ALBA, because we see that it has great potential. We have not yet seen the evidence, but we have faith that it will come about. And that is why it's defined as faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of that which we have not yet seen. And hope, naturally, is an expectation and desire for a certain thing to happen. And fresh hope in this extraordinarily complicated and difficult world in which we have now found ourselves. And in this extraordinarily difficult and complicated world, rather than persons who have recently been victorious, in the United States of America, seeing this as an opportunity to engender peace and prosperity for all, that we live together. This is the 21st century. Instead, what do you get? You get an overwhelming sense that those who have been victorious think that they are omnipotent. And worse, they think that they are omniscient. They're all powerful and they're all knowing. Well, you know, not too long ago, when the Soviet Union collapsed, we were told that we have now reached the end of history, that we are in a unipolar world. Everybody has to worship at the altar of monopoly capitalism and a version of democracy as envisaged by the founding fathers in the United States of America. Well, unfortunately for those who have those illusions, the world is a more complicated and messy place, and contradictions do arise. It is part and parcel of life, living, and production. And we have a situation now where though we do not yet have a multipolar world, the dangers are that we are in transition from a unipolar world. The old order is dying, and the new is not yet quite born. And in that transition, there are enormous difficulties and complications. And if all of us who are in leadership positions in the world are not careful, and particularly those who possess nuclear weapons and who have the power to do real harm, if they do not recognize that there are contradictory forces at play with legitimacy and with authenticity, the demands of the Cuban people to develop themselves in accordance with how they see fit. Why don't you let them and work together with them? They may influence you, you may influence them. Similarly, you wage a war against them for 60 years, 60-odd years, relentless, many times to kill Fidel. You use terror, because one of the worst forms of terror is to single out the leader of another country, deliberately to go about to kill him. And yet you put Cuba on the list of state sponsor of terrorism. When in fact, in our Caribbean, certainly in my lifetime, the only act of terror was committed against a Cubana aircraft in October 1976, where 70-odd Cubans, Guyanese, and North Koreans were killed. And the persons who did the bombing were linked to the CIA, and none of them met justice for that particular act of terror. I am not saying anything, and I repeat, I love the American civilization. It has a vitality. It has a spirit. And a lot of our people from the Caribbean and Latin America like it too and go to it. But even those who go to it often with a heavy heart because it possesses dimensions which are insufficiently human. And a better world is possible. A better world is possible. And we must have that conversation among ourselves to have a better world for all our peoples. Now, a system has been established in global institutions after 1945. To the victors, the spoils. They set up the business so in the United Nations that they will control things through the Security Council. They set it up in the IMF and the World Bank so that they can control things. Well, the world is a different place than it was then. It's changing. So we need substantive reforms. And we need a reform of the financial architecture. I am not saying that the World Bank has done no good. For me to say that would mean that I am not looking at the data. But the fact of the matter is this: it has not done anything near as good as it could reasonably have done if it had been shaped differently and if the reforms take place now and take into consideration the interests of developing countries. Climate change. Look, St. Vincent and the Grenadines is one of the most vulnerable countries in the world. I have been in office as Prime Minister since the general elections of March the 28th, 2001. So I've been Prime Minister for nearly 24 years. I've had to face periodic elections every 5 years. I have another election sometime before the end of next year. But the last election was November 2020. We have free and fair elections. People decide that they vote us. Despite all the propaganda. But governing a small island developing country like St. Vincent and the Grenadines is like going up a down escalator where the down escalator is moving faster than the upward movement. And what causes real problems, among other things, is climate change. Our contribution to global warming is non-existent, de minimis. In the 24 years, taking out the volcanic eruptions of April 2021 and COVID in the year 2020, we have had 12 serious natural disasters connected to climate change. The last one, July the 1st, Hurricane Beryl. The economic damage was 1/3 of our gross domestic product. The economic loss is in excess of that. I have to rebuild 6,000 houses. Those who are responsible for global warming and the increase in global temperature to above 1.5 degrees Celsius, above pre-industrial levels, they're not making any contribution to your rebuilding. But why I say the genius of our people, despite all those natural disasters, we have been able, in real terms, to more than double the average per capita income in our country and to lift our country from a medium level of human development to a high level of human development. And I want to put on record that one of the integration movements to which we belong, which has made a significant contribution to the lifting in the development of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, is ALBA, through the ALBA Bank, through Petrocarib, and through practical cooperation between ALBA members, especially Cuba and Venezuela. I don't have to quote chapter and verse. The evidence is there for anybody who wants to see that. No. When I say to the United States, my friends, and I hope they're listening to me, and I'm taking a little time on it because this broadcast, I think, goes worldwide. Under Petrocarib, every single year during the Petrocarib agreement, and I want the people of Venezuela to know this, we didn't get the fuel at a price cheaper than the world market price. We got it at the same price as Venezuela as a good member in standing in OPEC, at level. Where we got the advantage is that the financing arrangement assisted us, because rather than paying cash up front, it came as a loan at a very low rate of interest. And Fidel and Chavez worked this out as part of the ALBA arrangements. And the business continued. And every year, therefore, rather than going to borrow money expensively, there was a pot of money to be had here on this financial arrangement, which I was able to take to put to housing, to put to education, and to deal with poverty in my country. By carrying out against Venezuela a vengeful policy of sanctions with no objective basis other than vengeance and punishment, punitive. You weaponize the US dollar. You kill Petrocarib. The Americans, by sanctioning Venezuela, had collateral damage to countries which they call their friends in the Eastern Caribbean, which are member states of ALBA. The same way that the sanctions have contributed to financial and material hardship in Cuba, and as the rapporteur in 2021, the UN rapporteur said about Venezuela, that the sanctions cause persons in Venezuela, ordinary working people, to go into poverty. I want the American people and the American leaders to understand this. Now we are at a complicated moment in history. Men and women make history, but only to the extent that the circumstances of history permit them so to make. We do not make history in circumstances chosen by ourselves. We make history in circumstances inherited from the past and what has arisen in contemporary circumstances. Part of the problem, of course, is that some of what is inherited from the past are ideas in the heads of men and women which oftentimes weigh like a nightmare on their brain. And you have to free yourself from those ideas which weigh like a nightmare on your brain. If you have to emancipate yourself to go to a higher level of life, living, and production in the interest of the peoples of all the world. Now, I don't want to say anything here today about the conflict in the Ukraine, except to call for peace. But I have to say something about Gaza. I wrote a letter recently to President Biden, President Putin, President Zelensky, and the Secretary General of the United Nations about peace in Ukraine. Gaza. There's a resolution here, a declaration here on Palestine, which I support 100%. And Palestine, you know, I'll tell a little story. Big powers, those in quest of hegemony, tend to ignore that other peoples have histories. All of us have histories. And to understand how the thing runs, we have to ask our grandparents and our parents, and we have to ask our daughters and our sons. And to understand the compromises that history has made all of us, and the purpose of asking our whole daughter, asking our parents and grandparents and our daughters and our sons, the purpose of doing that is to make a whole daughter and a whole son out of the compromises that the fever of history has made us. And to do so, we have to come home to ourselves. I went in the year 2009 to Iran when President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad was president. And as a consequence of that visit, I went to the Vatican, I went to Portugal, I went to the Vatican, I saw Pope Benedict. He even gave me a mission to take to Iran. But a large contingent of persons came from the State Department after I returned from Iran to talk to me as to why did you go to Iran? So I told them, I said, I didn't understand. I don't understand the question. They said, well, it's okay. We don't mean that you don't have the sovereign right to go. I said, listen, among friends, I wouldn't raise the fig leaf of sovereignty. But I don't understand the question. So I'm going to answer your question, which I don't understand, with a question to you. Would you please tell me where in the Hebrew Bible, or indeed the New Testament, do I meet the United States of America? They said they didn't understand. I say, well, you know, in the book of Daniel, in the Old Testament, there's the Persian Empire. Iran is the successor to the Persian Empire. I said, Daniel was a Jewish prophet, a Hebrew prophet, and he was the chief administrator for the king of Persia. I say, every people have their history. The Palestinian people have their own history, and they have their land. There is a Palestinian civilization. The Palestinians are not temporary occupants of any land. They are in permanent residence of that land which they are claiming from time immemorial. And there are also in that area all the Hebrew people who have lived there. And the Hebrews and the Palestinians used to live together. And then a doctrine of Zionism arose. And if you speak to this, people may say that you're anti-Semitic. Well, I have grown up in a manner, in a way, where I have absolutely no prejudice in relation to anything or any person. I don't have any of those bones in my body. Netanyahu is not the reincarnation of Moses. Netanyahu wants to wipe out the Palestinian civilization, wipe them out completely. And what he's doing, everybody knows, everybody who has the slightest conscience, whether your conscience is derived from with no belief in any divine being, whether you're a Hindu, a Christian, a believer in Judaism, you're a Buddhist, whatever, you know that what is being done is wrong and it is sinful. But because of power arrangements, the United States of America has prevented a ceasefire. Never mind the talking about a ceasefire, because there are many occasions before the United Nations Security Council the question of the ceasefire came about, and the entire world said yes, except the United States of America. That is a blot on the conscience and the civilization of those who represent that civilization in the United States of America. It's a complicated question, but I want us, as we have done here, to make a call, as the United Nations has done, the General Assembly and 14 members of the Security Council said, we must have a ceasefire. Let's have a conversation and let's bring about peace in the Middle East. Now there are three paths. PATHS, where we can go forward. One, we can roll over and play dead to imperialism and hegemony. Or we can strategically accommodate ourselves to imperialism, which means leave it to do what it wants. Or thirdly, we can take the path of creative resistance and reconstruction. ALBA is about creative resistance and reconstruction. I want to let everybody who is listening to me know, I have a grandson just born. He was born in the United States of America. His father is Haitian American. His grandfather, his mother is Vincentian, so he's entitled in law at the moment to American citizenship, to Haitian citizenship, and to Vincentian citizenship. I want to see my grandson, who takes his first name from Hugo Chavez. to be in an America of peace, of love, of faith, and of fresh hope. I want him to be in a St. Vincent and the Grenadines with those same values, and also in the great Republic of Haiti, those same values. I do not in any way at all have anything other than huge admiration for the American civilization. Warts and all, because I don't expect purity anywhere. Nicholas Guillen taught me that in the poem, I declare myself an impure man. But we must be on this earthly city the best we can in peace, in love, in faith, and in fresh hope. That is why St. Vincent and the Grenadines is a long-standing member of ALBA, and ALBA is a force for good. Thank you very much.